They say the cruelest betrayals don't come with slammed doors or screaming fights. They come with wine glasses raised, smiles painted on, and a single sentence designed to gut you in public. Some sentences don't just hurt, they tilt the whole floor under you. Mine arrived on a Thursday night, between roast chicken, wine, and Vivian's carefully curated friends. She lifted her glass, looked straight at me, and said, "Everyone else's husbands are better than Lucas." It wasn't shouted. It didn't need to be. Her words slid across the table like broken glass. Forks paused, smiles cracked, and three women suddenly found their plates fascinating. I stood, stacked dishes, and walked into the kitchen. The water from the tap steamed my glasses as I rinsed. Helpful, really. It blurred my reflection. By the time I returned, I was carrying dessert. "Anyone want crème brûlée?" I asked, smiling like it was all perfectly normal. The silence tasted better than the custard. Later, when the guests had gone, Vivian lingered in the kitchen like a cat waiting for a door to open. "You're not going to say anything?" I closed the dishwasher with a calm click. "I think you said enough." "That's not what I—" "It's exactly what you meant," I cut in. Then, "Good night, Vivian." She stood there, earrings in her hand, looking suddenly less like a queen and more like someone who misplaced her crown. Lying awake, I replayed her sentence. Better husbands. Better how? Flowers, trips, Instagram captions? I'd watched those perfect marriages long enough to know the seams. Damien, the trainer, sculpted like a Greek statue and twice as proud. Charles, the generous spender, tossing credit cards like confetti. Adrian, the corporate shark, climbing ladders while stepping on anyone within reach. Vivian adored them, the highlight reels, and now she'd put me at the bottom of her scorecard. Fine. If she wanted comparisons, she'd get them, just not the kind she imagined. The next morning, I kissed her hair on my way out. "You're not mad?" she asked. "I'm evaluating," I said. It unnerved her more than shouting ever could. That word, better, kept circling in my head like a fly that wouldn't leave the room. Better husbands. Better how? Muscles? Money? Career titles on LinkedIn? Vivian spoke as if they were Olympic champions and I was the guy carrying their towels. So I decided to check. If these men were really the shining examples their wives bragged about, then fine. I'd see what kind of gold medals they were polishing. And if the reality didn't match the brochure, well, Vivian deserved the full picture. Damien was the first test subject. The gym was his stage. Mirrors, sweat, and a half circle of women pretending to stretch while watching him deadlift. "Lucas!" he boomed when he saw me, clapping my shoulder like he was branding me. "Didn't know you came in this early." "Trying to keep up," I said, loading plates onto my bar. "Though you make it look like child's play." He grinned. "Perks of the job. Gotta stay in shape when half my clients sign up just to stare." "Must be exhausting," I said lightly, "all that attention." He smirked. "Exhausting? Nah. Tempting sometimes, sure. Maya gets suspicious if I come home late, but hey, she knew what she signed up for." I raised an eyebrow. "Suspicious, huh?" He shrugged, wiping sweat from his forehead. "You know how it is. Women read into everything. One perfume smell, and suddenly it's an interrogation. Better to just buy her a necklace and move on." He laughed at his own joke. I smiled like it was funny. Inside, I filed it away. The alpha husband so admired by Vivian was really just a teenager with muscles, bribing his wife with jewelry every time he got caught. Charles was easier. He never missed a chance to be seen, so he picked a hotel lobby bar where the napkins weighed more than some people's wallets. He greeted me with both hands like I was a business deal about to close. "Lucas, my friend, just in time. We're heading to Tuscany next month. Totally spontaneous trip." I raised my glass. "Spontaneous? That's a bold luxury." He laughed the laugh of a man who'd practiced it in mirrors. "Well, that's the benefit of marrying well, isn't it? Lila's father left her quite the cushion. Makes it easy to enjoy life without sweating the small stuff." He sipped his drink. as if he hadn't just announced he was riding his wife's inheritance like a racehorse. I smiled politely. Convenient arrangement. Exactly, he said eagerly, mistaking my tone for admiration. I mean, I dabble in projects here and there, but why stress? We're comfortable. That's the whole point, isn't it? He went on about investments that never had numbers, about ventures that sounded like they belonged in air quotes. I let him talk, nodding at intervals, while he built his own gallows out of bragging rights. By the end of the night, one thing was clear. Charles wasn't the provider Vivian envied. He was a kept man, polished and useless, a trophy polished by someone else's money. Adrian was last on my list. Vivian loved to parade his name around. Adrian's on the fast track. Adrian knows all the right people. Adrian and Serena are such a power couple. If you listened to her long enough, you'd think the man ran half the city. He and Serena hosted a dinner at their townhouse. Polished floors, expensive art, the kind of place where every detail screamed, "Look, how much I'm winning." Serena greeted me softly, graceful in a way that didn't need chandeliers. But Adrian moved in immediately, placing a hand on her shoulder like a boss dismissing his assistant. "Lucas," he said, gripping my hand too hard, voice already carrying across the room. "Glad you made it. We've got half the firm here tonight. Perfect networking." He didn't say friends, he said networking. That was Adrian in one word. At dinner, he dominated the table, every story bent toward his brilliance. When Serena offered an opinion about a book, he cut her off with a laugh. Serena's cute when she plays intellectual, but she knows her real strength is keeping the house running so I can focus on real work. The table chuckled nervously. Serena lowered her eyes to her wine glass. I leaned back, watching him. Adrian's face was pure satisfaction. He thought humiliating his wife was entertainment, proof of his dominance. When the plates were cleared, he gave a little toast. To partnerships that matter, the ones that get you promoted. He raised his glass toward a senior partner, not his wife. Serena clinked her glass anyway, because what else could she do? I smiled politely. But inside, I filed him where he belonged. Not a husband, not even a man. Just a resume wearing shoes. By the time I'd finished my quiet little tour, the picture was clear. Damien, the alpha, sculpted like a statue, but with the loyalty of a stray dog. A man who can lift weights heavier than his promises. Charles, the provider, except the provision comes from his wife's inheritance. A trophy husband who polishes himself in public while living off someone else's account. Adrian, the successful career man, who treats his wife like a secretary and humiliates her to remind the world who's boss. His marriage is just another rung on his ladder. These were Vivian's shining examples. These were the paragons she held up as proof that I wasn't enough. Better husbands, she called them. Better at cheating, leeching, and belittling, maybe. And I realized then, I didn't need to defend myself. All I had to do was wait. Their own lies would do the heavy lifting for me. The thing about masks is they never fall off politely. They slip, they crack, they crumble when you least expect them. And when they do, the sound is deafening, even if everyone at the table pretends they didn't hear a thing. Vivian didn't hear it at first, but she would. Damien's fall. It happened faster than I expected. A week later, Maya showed up at Vivian's place in tears. The girls had been out shopping, and Maya's phone kept buzzing. She ignored it at first, until Vivian joked, "What, Damien's clients can't survive an hour without him flexing?" That was the wrong door to open. Because Maya, tired and brittle, snapped, "Clients, right? You know how many of them he's been training after hours?" The words hung in the living room like smoke. Vivian's smile died in slow motion. Maya pulled up her messages, shoved the screen at her. Photos, late-night texts, receipts from a hotel he swore was for a fitness conference. Vivian didn't look at me, but I felt the silence land like a stone between us. So much for the alpha husband. Turns out the only muscle Damien couldn't control was his impulse. Charles's slip. 2 weeks later, Vivian dragged me to a dinner with Charles and Lila. Charles arrived in a blazer that had definitely never seen a sale tag. waving to the waiter like he owned the place. He ordered a bottle of wine that cost more than most people's rent, and started telling us about his business ventures. Each story had fewer details than a horoscope. Then came the bill. He reached for his wallet with a flourish, only for Lila to lay her credit card down first, faster than a gunslinger. She didn't even blink, just slid it across like muscle memory. The waiter took it. Charles chuckled awkwardly, raising his hands. "You know how it is. My card's tied up with some international transfers." Lila shot him a look so sharp it could have cut the check in half. "Don't start," she said flatly. "We both know whose money pays for this." The silence was volcanic. Even the waiter nearly tripped on the way back. I sipped my drink. Vivian pushed food around her plate, cheeks burning. So much for the generous provider. Turns out the only thing Charles provided was a polished ego at someone else's expense. Adrian's show. Adrian was the grand finale. He invited us, again, to one of his community dinners. The room was filled with partners, associates, people who laughed too loudly at his stories. Serena floated like a ghost at his side. At one point, she mentioned softly that she'd started a painting class. Just a normal sentence, a sliver of her own life. Adrian pounced. "Painting?" He laughed, loud enough for the whole table. "She can't even color inside the lines? Last week she forgot an appointment because she was sketching. Imagine trusting her with anything serious." The room chuckled nervously. Serena smiled weakly, but her eyes were glass. I glanced at Vivian. She wasn't smiling, not even close. Adrian kept going, story after story, each one a little knife dressed as humor. By dessert, Serena excused herself to the bathroom. She didn't come back for 15 minutes. Vivian stared at her untouched plate. For once, she had nothing to say. So much for the power couple. Adrian wasn't building a marriage. He was building a pedestal for himself, and Serena was just the step he stood on. Vivian's realization. On the drive home, Vivian was quiet. No gushing about Adrian's charm, no comments about Charles's generosity, no admiration for Damien's physique. She just stared out the window, city lights flickering across her face. Finally, she whispered, Maybe they're not as perfect as I thought." I gripped the wheel, kept my eyes on the road. "Better husbands, though," I said softly, just enough sarcasm to sting. She flinched but didn't argue. For the first time, Vivian had seen the cracks in the marble. And once you see a crack, you can't unsee it. The silence in the house wasn't comfortable anymore. It wasn't the kind you sink into after a long day. It was brittle, sharp, the kind that made every clink of a glass sound like breaking porcelain. Vivian moved through it carefully, like she was afraid of setting off alarms. For days she avoided names. Damien, Charles, Adrian, once her favorite syllables, had disappeared from her vocabulary. She didn't compare me anymore, didn't sigh when she saw their photos, didn't parrot their supposed virtues. She only watched me now, like a student realizing she'd misread the entire lesson. Her first apology came dressed in silk. I walked in one night to a table lit by candles, wine poured, and Vivian in that emerald dress she reserved for nights when she wanted the world to stop breathing. She smiled nervously, pouring my glass as though it might wash away the memory of her words. "Lucas," she said softly, "I owe you an apology." I sat down slowly. "For dinner? Or something else?" Her face faltered, but she pushed on. "I was wrong. About comparing you, about saying what I said. I didn't mean it the way it came out." I swirled the wine in my glass, watching the candlelight ripple across it. "So now that your idols are collapsing, I'm suddenly worth something again?" Her hand reached across the table, trembling. "You've always been worth everything." I was blind. I pulled my hand back, as if her touch might stain. "No, Vivian, you weren't blind. You saw exactly what you wanted to see. You just didn't expect the picture to rot." The candles sputtered in the draft, and neither of us ate. 2 days later she tried again, this time stripped of glamour. No dress, no performance. Just her in the kitchen, sleeves rolled, hair tied back, voice trembling, not with performance but with fatigue. "Lucas," she said, almost a whisper. "I was cruel. I was stupid. I don't know why I thought those men were better. I see them now. They're not. They're nothing. And you," her voice cracked, tears burning in her eyes, "you're the one who's real." I leaned against the counter, arms folded. "Real? That's your big revelation?" She shook her head desperately. "It's more than that. You're kind, steady, faithful. You've never humiliated me, never lied to me, never used me. I don't want to lose that. I don't want to lose you." I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because irony can taste bitter enough to choke. The tragedy, Vivienne, is that you had to watch other people's disasters before you noticed my consistency. If Damien had kept his zipper closed, Charles had hidden his dependence better, and Adrian had abused his wife more discreetly, you'd still think they were gods, and I'd still be the man you thought was beneath them. She shook her head violently. "No, that's not true." "It's exactly true," I cut her off, voice sharp enough to slice through her denial. That night, she crept into bed, her hand resting tentatively on my chest as if touch alone might erase the rift. "I don't want to lose you," she whispered into the dark. I stared at the ceiling, unmoved. "You already have." Her breath caught. She pulled back, eyes shining in the dim light. "Don't say that." "I'm not saying it," I replied evenly. "I'm confirming it. You made the trade the night you announced to the world that everyone else's husbands were better. That was the deal. You sold me out for illusions." Tears ran silently down her face. She tried again, broken now. "I was wrong. You're better than them, Lucas. Better than all of them." I laughed then, a quiet, cruel laugh that carried no joy. "And yet that was the last thing you ever realized." I stood, pulling on a shirt, the fabric whispering finality. I looked at her one last time, the woman who had once been enough, once been mine. "Here's the truth. Damien is a liar with abs. Charles is a parasite in designer shoes. Adrian is a tyrant with a resume. And me?" I spread my hands. "I'm the boring one. The one who cooks, pays bills, stays faithful, and never needs to buy back his wife's forgiveness with diamonds or fake promotions." Her lips trembled. "That's not boring. That's everything." "Not to you," I said, voice like a blade wrapped in velvet. "Not until their masks fell apart. You didn't want me, Vivienne. You wanted an illusion. So do yourself a favor, go chase another one. Find a new idol. Because I'm done competing in a race I already won, the moment they opened their mouths." She sobbed, begging, calling my name as I walked to the door. I put my hand on the knob, paused only long enough to give her the final truth. Sharp, sarcastic, and final. "Turns out I was the better husband all along, and that's exactly why you'll never have me again." Then I left, and for the first time in weeks, the silence belonged to me. I didn't go far, just far enough. A spare room at my friend Daniel's place, a couch that smelled faintly of beer and pizza, a bed that creaked when you looked at it wrong, but it was freedom. It was silence I chose. Daniel raised an eyebrow when I showed up with a single duffel bag. "Trouble?" I dropped the bag in the corner. "Correction," I said. "Solution." He didn't ask more. That's why he's a friend. The first week felt surreal. No Vivienne hovering in mirrors, no perfume clouding the hallways, no passive-aggressive sighs when I forgot a chore. Just me, the hum of an old fridge, and the delicious emptiness of a room that didn't demand I prove myself against imaginary competitors. During the day, I met with a lawyer. We went over the paperwork, the signatures, the process. Divorce. Cold, methodical, clean. It felt like drawing a scalpel across a wound that had festered too long. When the papers were finally sent, I knew the storm was coming. It didn't take long. The call came 2 nights later. Her name flashing across my phone, screen glowing like an alarm. I almost let it ring out. Almost. I answered. Lucas. Her voice was already breaking, strangled by sobs. I got the papers, you can't. Please don't do this, don't throw everything away. We can fix it, I'll change, I swear I'll change. I sat back, listening to the familiar orchestra of her desperation. Once, it might have twisted something in me, but now it sounded like background noise in a film I'd stopped watching. Vivian, I said calmly, I didn't throw anything away. You did? I'm just taking out the trash. She gasped like I'd slapped her. No, you don't mean that. You love me. You always have. We can start over. Forget what I said. Forget what I did. That's the problem, I cut in. You want me to forget. I don't forget. And I don't forgive a woman who only values me when her illusions collapse. She was crying openly now, each sob jagged against the phone speaker. Lucas, please, don't do this to me. To you? I almost laughed. Vivian, this isn't happening to you. This is happening because of you. Actions have consequences. Words have weight. You wanted better husbands? Go find one. See how long he lasts before the paint peels. Silence stretched, broken only by her crying. Goodbye, Vivian, I said at last. Enjoy the company of your ideals. I'll enjoy my peace. I hung up before she could answer. That night, I slept like a man who had finally put down a heavy load. The couch springs dug into my back, Daniel's dog snored at my feet, and it was the best rest I'd had in years. Some men need women to define them. Some women need illusions to make their lives bearable. Me? I needed neither. Turns out the worst husband at the table was the best decision I ever made. Divorces don't explode, they dissolve. Paperwork, signatures, stamps, no fireworks, no orchestras, just the quiet click of a door that doesn't reopen. When it was done, when the ink dried, I didn't feel broken. I felt lighter, like carrying a backpack full of bricks and suddenly realizing you could just set it down. Vivian moved back into her curated world of brunches and whispers. Only now, the whispers were about her. About how Damien's affairs had gutted Maya. About how Charles's wife had finally stopped paying for his charades. About how Adrian's cruelty had driven Serena into therapy. Her perfect circle of husbands collapsed like a cheap card table, and she was left standing in the rubble, clutching a crown that no longer fit. She called a few more times in the weeks after, her voice smaller each time. Promises of change, declarations of love, tears flowing like confetti at a parade nobody attended. I didn't pick up after the third call. By the fourth, she stopped trying. People asked me if I regretted it, leaving, ending it. They asked as though regret was the natural state of a man who lost a wife. But the truth? The only thing I regretted was not doing it sooner. I stayed at Daniel's for a while until the papers were final. Then I found a small apartment. Nothing fancy. A couch that didn't sag, a bed that didn't creak, a kitchen where no one judged me for leaving dishes overnight. Freedom doesn't need chandeliers. It just needs space to breathe. Sometimes I saw Vivian in passing, at the market, on the street. She always looked polished, perfect, as if nothing had cracked. But her eyes betrayed her. They carried that desperate shine of someone who once held a diamond and traded it for glass. And me? I laughed more. I slept better. I discovered the strange joy of solitude, of knowing that silence isn't punishment, but peace. They say marriage is about finding the person you can't live without. But the truth is, it's about finding the person who never makes you question your own worth. Vivian failed that test, spectacularly. So I let her chase her illusions, her better husbands, her fantasies with expiry dates. As for me, I'll take my reality. My boring, honest, faithful reality. The kind that doesn't need a spotlight or a comparison or an audience. And if that makes me the worst husband she ever had, good. Because it also makes me the happiest man she'll never get back.